Hello class, welcome to Toxicity 101. Please have a seat, get comfortable, not too comfortable, but comfortable enough that you are able to sit through this entire class because this is very important. Of course, as you know, as the first class, we will be going over the syllabus. We'll be going over many things, especially in terms of this class, what we're going to accomplish in the 8 weeks that we have. Now, if this class is not what you expected, if this is, a class that you are morally against, that's totally fine. You can simply drop out. It is, of course, part of your core. This is something that everybody must have. So, with that being said, if you want to drop out, if you want to be a little bit of a little baby, you can totally do that and go on your way, okay? You might have to drop out of college, but that's totally fine. And I said college because I am, of course, in America. That is to say, let us discuss what we're going to go over, right? So we're going to go over the basics first. Just what is this class? What are you doing here? What am I doing here? And then we're going to discuss me, who I am, why am I qualified to talk about toxicity, and how I can teach you to be toxic, okay? Then we're going to talk about what constitutes toxicity. Now, many things constitute toxicity, and there are many different ways to be toxic. That is something that we are going to cover the entire 8 weeks, okay? This is not a one and done. This is not something that I can answer just in this one short session, okay? Then we're going to talk about the policies of this class, attendance, how the grading rubric, that sort of thing. Then we're going to, of course, discuss your final project. That is going to be incredibly important, and we're going to discuss that at the end, okay? Okay. Any questions so far, class? No. Okay. So, let's start, of course, with the basics. Toxicity. This is, of course, Toxicity 101. So, why are we teaching you to be toxic? Well, it is absolutely vital. Toxicity in any form particularly within games, is honestly a tradition at this point. Think of games, ancient games, yes? Chess, checkers, backgammon. Do you think that there was no toxicity? Do you think the idea of a sore loser or a sore winner is something that did not exist? No. That is something that has not only existed, but it has been celebrated. Some of the greatest thinkers were sore winners, and some of the greatest losers died. So, the biggest thing about this is that you need to understand that you need to be not just a winner, but a sore winner. You need to be absolutely toxic to your surroundings, to the people around you, to essentially anybody that is within proximity, online or offline. Now, I also want to discuss, this is, of course, a science class, but do not let that fool you. This toxicity and being toxic is an art form. Think of the creativity that comes in with different ways to insult another person. It's honestly brilliant, right? I mean, think about flipping the bird. It's honestly one of the most ingenious ways to get a curse across. Now, of course, that is very simple, and you can't really do that over voice chat or over text, right? So, I mean, you could send an emoji, but mostly that is an in-person thing, right? So you want to try and find the best ways to destroy your enemies verbally, right? And honestly, one of the best people to be toxic are sort of popular people, because they feel the power in their words, and they're able to insult, right, in a way that's very persuasive, right? You want the person who you're insulting to have to think about whether they're actually being insulted. That's how you know you've won. Now, all games are valid in regards to toxicity. This is a very inclusive class. Yes, so whether you are a casual gamer, a hardcore gamer, whether you play Candy Crush, Minecraft, Overwatch, League of Legends, Genshin Impact, any game you can be toxic in, it is welcome. Some of the most creative insults in creative ways, some of the biggest takedowns that I have seen in my career have been in Candy Crush. Do not underestimate the power of a 65-year-old woman who has done over 250 levels of Candy Crush competing against another. Oh, do not underestimate the power that woman has. So, all gamers are valid. Now, we will, of course, discuss different forms of toxicity, that is to say, in person, online, through text, through speech, all of these things, through emotes as well, like in-game emotes, and that sort of thing, through skins, really anything. This is where the creativity comes in, right? Being toxic is such a brilliant way as a human race to really stretch our brains, our minds, right? It's a very fabulous brain teaser to figure out a way, after you've killed somebody in a game, to figure out how to best annoy them. It's absolutely brilliant. Okay, and of course, we're going to talk about the creative uses. Now, as I've said before, it's all very creative, but we're going to talk about in particular, we're going to talk about what are some different ways that are up and coming in the toxic environment, in the toxic community, because we're a very tight-knit community, the toxic community. You'd be surprised. We do have a group chat. I will, of course, invite you all with the link. You might get rickrolled, but that's totally fine. It's a bit of a thing, and you might get hazed when you're in there, just FYI, but that's totally fine. It's absolute. I've talked to the school board, and they are totally on board. So, with that will be the basics. Any questions, class? Yes, you over there? Okay. You're not quite sure what toxicity is. Well, we'll get to that. You don't really know what being toxic. Have you ever had a friend that simply cut you off because they didn't like you? Maybe because you were being a bit annoying? See, now that friend was being toxic. And honestly, if you could get that friend into this class and have them sign in instead of you, that would be brilliant, okay? All right. So, next, let's go to who I am. I am Professor Basil. I have been proudly toxic since 2003, so absolutely been a very long time. I mean, it's been a journey. It's been such a journey, and I actually gave a TED talk. Was that? Yes, it was a TEDx talk, but that's basically a TED talk. By the way, good points on you for bringing that up. What's your name? You're brilliantly toxic there. You have potential. You have such potential. Okay. So yes, I did give a TEDx talk on toxicity. It's been one of my greatest passions. And I have dealt with the highs and lows of gamer academia. It's honestly one of the, as much as I despise the people within gamer academia, I must commend them for being, horrible, being in an insane group of people. Honestly. So, and of course, I must say, in my journey, I always knew that failing was simply not an option for me. Failing at being toxic, there's nothing worse than that. Then you're just a loser. And who wants to be that? So, that is who I am. So, let us now discuss what constitutes toxicity, right? And in what forms does it come in? So, if you think about toxicity, I'm sure the first thing that you think of are slurs, right? The classics. I'm not going to repeat any in case anybody gets offended, but of course I say them all the time. They're practically in my vocabulary. And of course, if you look at the cheat sheet that I gave you within the syllabus, it does have a list of slurs that you are able to use. Within this class, you do get the pass. The class does have a black friend, a gay friend, and basically any nationality that you can think of, and any ethnicity in particular. The class does have a friend that has given us a pass, so you are totally fine to use them. But all that to say, slurs are still the very last season. Saying a slur is sort of like admitting that you've lost your creativity, you've lost your intelligent wit, right? Because part of being intelligent, part of being toxic, is being able to outwit your opponent. And you can't really do that if you just simply rely on slurs. And if you're online, it's going to be very difficult for you to land a slur correctly. You might hear a high-pitched voice and assume that the fellow is gay. You might be able to, get a few cheeky questions in and discern perhaps the ethnicity of the person. But that's so lame, you're doing intel on your opponent in the middle of the game when you should be being toxic. That's simply not that. No. That simply won't do. Instead, we're going to go past that. Yes? Slurs, let's leave them behind. You may have a cheat sheet. It's something to fall back on, but it's not something to take advantage of. Use very sparingly, is what I'll say. And I could see a few of you that are going to use the slurs anyway. And you know what? I didn't think that highly of you anyway, so more power to you. So, really, what I want you to think about is emotional manipulation. Emotional manipulation is honestly such an underrated way to get into the heads of your opponent and really twist them up into a pretzel. When you are being emotionally manipulative, you are trying to presume the position that your opponent is in. And by opponent, I do mean the person you're trying to be toxic, not necessarily the opponent within the game. So when I say be toxic in a game of, say, Overwatch or something, you want to be toxic primarily to your own teammates, because remember, it doesn't matter who you're being toxic in, so long as you come out on top. So, emotional manipulation. You want to make them think that you are on their side while also putting them down. So you would say things like, stop, in particular, if, say, for example, there is someone who is insulting another teammate of yours, two teammates of yours, one's insulting the other, you would go to the person being insulted and you would say, oh, that person is totally wrong to talk to you like that. We both know that you're terrible at this game, but that doesn't mean that they have to be so mean about it. It's totally fine. Just uninstall the game after this game and make sure that you block me so that I never get matched with you in a game again. That way, they feel like you're both defending them and insulting them, and it gives them that, it just has that je ne sais quoi. Okay? You also want to make sure you want to throw in some therapy speak. Yes, so therapy speak. Therapy has been getting very, very popular these days, and so people are less prone to bland insults and slurs. So instead, you want to therapy speak. You want to use the language of therapists to protect your own peace and to make sure that, they aren't harshing your vibe and that you are, in fact, taking care of yourself. That is the kind of language that you want to use. Okay? Now, something else in terms of what constitutes toxicity is honing in on insecurities. You want to try and find what someone is insecure about, regardless of identity. If someone's being really shy and they want to, they want to speak, but they're being very shy about it. You want to, really hone in on that fact, because there's nothing better than insulting someone with something that they are incredibly insecure about. That way you can feel much better, and now you've become a more horrible person and more toxic. And this does, in fact, this is a bit of an aside and a bit of a tangent. These methods will perhaps isolate you from a lot of people. It might cause you to be seen as perhaps not a great person. Perhaps they might think of you as maybe a terrible person, and that you are in need of a lot of help, and that no one would really want to be your friend. You might lose some family members. But that is totally fine. Look at me. I have been proudly toxic since 2003, and I may have nobody in my life, and I am absolutely alone at my home, but I'll be honest, it's not that bad. I have my games and I have my TV. What more do I need? So, with that, we are going to also talk about the last thing, which is, if you're banned in a video game, it means you're doing something right? They don't think of a video game like a parent. Yes, a neglectful parent in particular. So if they ban you, you've got your parent, your daddy is now looking at you. They're paying attention to you. That is a reward. Never forget that. Okay, so how are we feeling, class? Very good, yes. Okay, well, with that, let's just talk about some things that we need to discuss, which is the policies and the final project, and you'll be able to leave, all right? Okay, so for policies, attendance is, of course, mandatory. It wouldn't be a toxicity class if I don't make attendance mandatory. However, attendance accounts for 0% of your grade. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you don't attend class for even one single class, you automatically fail. But being in class does not necessarily dictate how much you get as a for your grade. It's really the worst of both worlds, and it is perfect. Next, I need to make sure everybody must go out to the campus store and purchase my book. It's incredibly important for the syllabus and for this class. This class is incredibly important and incredibly vital. I fought very hard to have this class on the syllabus and in your core. And of course, the book is I Am Meta, and that is honestly incredibly insightful. Many critics are giving it, 2 stars, which they don't give stars that high, and it's incredible. It's only going to be $250 per student, and you do not get a discount. I'm trying to work with the university to make sure that they get a discount out, but for now, unfortunately for both me and you, it's just not going to be the case, and so you're going to have to pay full price, and I so unfortunately will have to accept the full price. So next, I have to say, you cannot, under any circumstances, be toxic to each other. All right, this is a completely safe space, incredibly inclusive, so you cannot be toxic to each other unless it is really funny. And who is the judge? Me. So if it's something that's really, really funny, say it in front of me, and then you can be toxic to your teammates and to your classmates, okay? Next, using AI, of course, will result in a failure. We do not accept it, and mostly because if you can't be serious about toxicity, then when can you get serious? You may as well leave, Toxicity is such an art form and such a sadistic way of living life. It's honestly a beauty. And I just don't understand why you would want something else to do it for you. Now, I understand you might be busy and overworked as a student. You have multiple classes, but I'm not going to pretend like you have other classes. I'm going to pretend that this is the only class that you're in, and that this is the only class that you must put your entire focus to. Never mind the fact that this is a half a credit course, so you're barely getting anything out of it. So, but that's neither here nor there. Now, let us move on to the final project. The final project is going to be individual. We've thought very long and hard about it being a sort of team or a group project. Unfortunately, in a toxicity class, that led to some logistical issues, let's say. So each person will be in charge of their own final project. It will be 3 weeks. So once we enter week 5, you will be starting to think about your final project. And of course, you should be thinking about it earlier, because remember, this is the only class that you're in. Next, the final project will span 3 games. And those games could be any of your own choosing, could be online, could be offline, could be in person, whatever it is. So long as there are people you do not know involved in the game, we're dandy. You must have, and this must be recorded. Yes, the final project must be recorded, and you must submit at least 15 breakdowns. Breakdowns as in a mental breakdown of your opponents, and at least 3 tearful cries. Yes, if the tears do not leave the eye, it is you have not been toxic enough, and it will not count. Okay? So, with that will be it. Is there any questions about the policies or about the final project? Yes? No, this will not be graded on a curve, simply because I refuse to accept that if you're an idiot, then I must give you a good grade because you're the best idiot of the class. No. That's simply not going to be the case. No. It's not graded on a curve. Now, anything else? Wonderful. So, we do have the sheet to sign out. And of course, a sheet for if you want to sign out of this class, drop this class if you want. We do end up having about a 75 to 80% drop rate in this class. Hopefully that gets better, but remember, this is not for the weak-hearted. Okay? Okay. Well, you have a good day and make sure to stay toxic. Okay. Bye-bye.